All right, brilliant. Okay, so let's get going. So yeah, thanks all of you for joining. It's really nice to see you. So from wherever you are in the world, that's really great that you've been able to join us today. We're going to show you Codemagic and give you a demo. But before that, we're just going to go through a few slides just to set the scene and tell you what Codemagic is and how it works. So what is Codemagic? It's a mobile CI/CD, which in itself is a buzzword which you probably heard, like data science, people using it, CI/CD, and you've probably heard that you're doing things wrong or you're not doing it right, which may be the case, but not necessarily so. However, the idea of continuous integration and continuous deployment is to give you feedback on your development practice by running tests and compiling your apps in a clean environment. In our case, we're running our environment on virtualized macOS systems. So every time you're running a build in our system, or it's running in a clean environment. So you can be sure that there are no local machine specific issues that are going to stop your teammates from building your applications, and you can catch errors before reaching production. So what makes Codemagic special is the fact that we're a fully managed service, which means that you don't have to spend time maintaining any servers, updating software such as Xcode or the Android SDK, and you can focus on developing your product. So the CI/CD part of the equation can be viewed as this loop here on the left-hand side, so the continuous integration. So this is the cycle that gives you feedback when you push your code into the repository. It starts getting built on Codemagic. We'll run tests, whether they're going to be unit tests or integration tests. And then if there's any failures at this point, we're going to be able to pick them up, or you're going to be able to see them before you're getting anywhere near to the production environment. So you're going to be able to correct those problems, check your code back in, and hopefully then get another green build coming out. So it gives you full visibility of what's going on. On the other side here, we've got another sort of feedback loop, which is the continuous delivery. So this gives us the automation of the distribution process to your app stores, so Google Play or the App Store for iOS, but also for other third-party services such as the App Center by Microsoft for distribution or Firebase app distribution. Basically, with Codemagic, you don't have to manually handle any of the code signing and publishing that you may be already doing locally and struggling with. So just to summarize this slide, you're getting reliable feedback. We provide a fully managed service with Codemagic. The environment we use is a macOS environment for the virtual machines, and the goal obviously is to get less production errors and get your code building clean. In terms of application support or platform support, we support mobile applications. We support the iOS apps, Android apps, but also the languages we support are varied as well. People might know us predominantly for Flutter, but we support other platforms such as React Native, iOS, native Android, Cordova, Ionic, and Xamarin. And going forward, we'll be supporting back-end applications as well. So we'll be able to deploy those for you. So in the demo that I'm going to show you today, I'm actually going to pick a Swift application to build and show you how we can publish this to the App Store Connect and see that in test flight. So who do we actually support with Codemagic? So a variety of people really. We've got the beginners who are just starting out with coding and wanting to use CI/CD. We've got small teams, open source software, startups, development agencies, large teams, people creating white label apps, and even enterprise teams. Now, from 10 years of experience, it's not that different wherever you are on this scale. So the enterprise team has the same kind of needs as a small team. However, the only difference may be the way they collaborate or the resource and security requirements, but fundamentally, the functionality that's being used is the same. The thing with Codemagic is that you can scale up your plan quite easily if you're starting small and scaling up. We can add new build machines without interrupting your service. We can create, add concurrencies, so you can run builds in parallel, all again without having to interrupt what you're currently doing as you grow. Okay, so how do you get help and support with the product? We have a Slack community, which you can access by going into the documentation and looking into the support link there, and that will give you a link to the Slack community. People from the community will help you. Codemagic's own support guys will be able to answer questions as well. Another good resource is actually the docs themselves. The documentation can be found at docs.codemagic.io. So we're updating that regularly with new information that should help you get your builds working quickly. There's also the blog. So if you go to blog.codemagic.io, you'll find some great articles on people using the solution to build their applications. And if you're a business level customer, then you benefit from business support, a dedicated engineer to help you both with onboarding and continuous support as you use the product. Okay, so we're going to have a look at the software now. So I'm just going to close this, and then we're going to go into Codemagic. I'm just going to start by logging out of my current session. Oh, okay, so I am logged out, which is always a good thing. So for those of you who haven't already signed up for the service, you can log in at codemagic.io, click on the sign up button, and use one of these providers such as GitHub, Bitbucket, or GitLab to sign up. And from here, you'll be able to access your repositories. Now, if you don't want Codemagic to see all of your repositories, you can also use the GitHub app that we have on the marketplace. And this will allow you to pick and choose which applications are visible here in the console. This might be more applicable if you're part of a corporate team and using your personal GitHub account for signing up. Another alternative for adding custom repositories is this link up here, which is the add app from custom source, which allows you to specify a Git repository and then use SSH keys to connect to that repository. So it could be a self-hosted repository. So if you host your own repository somewhere internally on a corporate network, then you should be able to use this option to connect to that repository. Okay, so I've got my own repositories exposed here, and I'm going to select one of them to build. So I already said that I was going to choose a Swift-based application. So I'm going to do a search at the top here. You can use these drop downs here to select which accounts you're searching or displaying on the screen and which programming languages. So it could be Dart, it could be something else, and whether or not you've previously built these applications, so on and so forth. So I'm going to start with this particular app here and choose Setup Build. This will take us to the workflow selection screen. If you go into the top section here, it will take you into a Flutter app. From there, you'll see that the interface is a UI for setting up your application. What we're going to be looking at today is using something a bit more powerful, which is the YAML configuration to set up your workflow, which is applicable to all of the other types of applications. So for iOS, Android, React Native, and Cordova, for example, we'll be using a configuration file. You can use this in your Flutter apps as well. So everything that I'm talking about regarding the YAML is applicable to the Flutter as well. So by clicking on here, it's going to take me into the first screen, and it's going to give me a way to download a configuration file that we're going to need to check into the root of our source code repository. So into the root of our project, basically. So I'm going to download this file, and just so you can see what I'm going to do with it, I'm going to open, I wanted to open Finder, that's no problem. So we'll go into my downloads, we'll grab that Codemagic file, and just so you can see where I'm putting it, I'm going to take it into the root of my project, and there it is. I'm then going to open that project up in open it up in VSCode, which eludes me at this moment. So let me just click on the link to find it. There it is. Okay. So what you should have here is a bare bones template for starting your YAML configuration. An important thing to note here is the fact that you can access the documentation directly from this link here. So if your IDE supports it, you should be able to click the link and open the documentation. And here it will give us the steps for building a native iOS app. One thing that you can note is the fact that we've got all the explanation of what commands you can use, examples of using our CLI tools, which simplify the process of code signing and provisioning profile handling extremely. And also, we've recently added some complete examples. So these are very close to what I'm showing you today. So if you need to set these kind of things, this kind of thing up for yourself, then there's a full example here that will allow you to publish your applications to the App Store. Similarly for our other application platforms, so if you're building for Android, there's some working examples there as well, and for React Native apps as well. So it's a good place to get further information about how to use the YAML files that we're talking about today. So what I'm going to do is get our initial build set up. Now, before I forget to do it, I'm going to try make sure I configure the webhooks that we're going to need for pushing in code to the repository. So if I just flick back over to here, I'm going to use a little bit of a workaround to add the webhooks, because at the moment they're not automatically added. The development team's aware of this and will be fixing this shortly. But for now, we're just going to try adding the webhooks by changing into the configuration for a Flutter application. I'm going to add a build trigger pattern, and I'm going to just say I want it to trigger on these events for the moment. I'm going to save that, and then just to verify that's worked, I'm going to go into the repository in GitHub, look at webhooks, and if all's been well, it looks like it's good. We can edit this and just make sure, yeah, it's put in a link to the application ID, and it should have set it up for branch or tag creation, pull requests, and pushes. So that's just a little workaround that we're using at the moment to get that set up quickly. Now, what I'm going to do is just to remove this pattern, uncheck these for the moment, save that, and hopefully I should be able to change back the build type. And if not, we're going to have to do it manually. So let's see. Okay.
On the top right.
That will be what I was looking for. Thanks. You could tell I was
Right.
struggling to see where it was there. Okay,
Right,
so that's fine. Let's go into iOS app. Right, that's where we want to be. We're back where we need to be. Right, so I didn't want to minimize that, but let's just go into VSCode. So the first thing I want to change is that because I haven't installed any Cocoa pods, I'm not currently using, or the project doesn't have an Xcode workspace. So what I'm going to do is just change this to be an environment variable. So let me just backtrack a moment. In the YAML file, we've got a section called workflows. Within the workflows, you can have multiple individual workflows. These could be for different app types, could be for iOS, could be for Android. I know we're looking at a Swift project, but this is a very flexible file. Within these workflows, we have the name of the workflow that we're going to see in the UI. We've got environment variables, for example, which will be values which are set as environment variables on the build servers. So you then can access them using this syntax beginning with a $sign here. We use this for storing secrets, and which are all encrypted, and I'm going to show you this shortly, so we can access them during build time. So let's just make a couple of changes then. So I want to define my Xcode project and scheme. So this is a YAML file, so you've got to be aware of the indentation. So you see here that if I've got it incorrect, I've currently got a extension installed for my VS Code, which just highlights that, thank you, Zoom, which highlights the fact that I've got the indentation incorrect. So in this case, what I'll do is just push that over there and set those values. What I'm also going to do is correct this line here, or modify it. It's not wrong, it's absolutely fine. So we need to put a project in there. And I'm going to change this variable name here to tell it to build the project, and then use the Xcode scheme, which is called Swiftly. So what I think I'll
use the $sign there.
Yes, I've got a $sign in there. That's okay. Yeah. Oh, not in that one though. Yeah. Okay. So the next thing I'm going to do at this point is add in some build triggers. Or in fact, what we could do first is just check this in to a Git. So I'm going to jump over to my projects folder and then change into my Swift projects and then look for my Swiftly app. And then I'm going to add this Codemagic YAML to the repository. And we're going to commit this, so git commit, add YAML, and then hopefully we should be able to just push that up. Okay, so the first time around, we're going to do a manual build. So I'm going to change over to Codemagic. And here, for the first time, what you need to do is check for the configuration file. See, we've got a piece of text here that says configuration file in master branch. And then let's just try doing this manually. So you can see here in the UI, it's picking up the workflow name that we specified in the YAML file. So that's going to start the build. Now, at the top of the screen here, you can see that we get access to the build server via SSH or VNC. And to use this, you can just copy the link, go back into your terminal. We've got an error there, which is good. I won't be able to connect if the machine's down, but it's given me enough time to connect. So in terms of troubleshooting, you can remote in and then access the file system and run commands there. Okay, so you're getting immediate feedback, as I mentioned in the initial slides, that something's not right. So, and I think just from looking at it, it looks like there's a single dash in front of scheme instead of the double dash that we need. So what we could do is go back in and fix that, and then just give it another try and see what happens, just to see if we can get that first initial build sorted out. So let's pop that in. Let's go back over here. Hopefully I should have the commands there. I'm just going to modify that. So let's just do update YAML, and then I do a push back to the repository. We'll do another manual build, and then after that, we're going to set up the auto build triggering, which should just speed things up a little bit for us. So I could have just gone back to the top of the screen. I just clicked the wrong button there. And then start a new build. And let's see what happens this time. So we can see the build started again. Information over the left-hand side shows us things such as the build number, branch we're building from, the name of the app, and that we're building from a YAML file. Again, we're preparing the build machine, and today it seems that I'm not very good at doing my build commands, so let's just see what we've got. This is the danger, you see, but it's good because I'm getting feedback on what's happening. I shouldn't have used capital letters in the command there, so let's just try that one more time. And then once that's checked in, I'll kick off a new build. Now I'm pretty confident that this will work this time. So
there's a YouTube channel as well called Boring Development Show, where people just sit behind the computer for 10 minutes trying to figure out where the
I think I'm doing that today, Martin, for sure.
No, it's good.
Right, so I'm going to let that churn away in the background because I think those are fixed now. So what we'll do is we'll start adding in the automatic triggers. So that's simply done by adding in a trigger section here, which we call triggering. We need to again make sure that the indentation is correct. So it's just move those over and correct these ones here. So they are in correct alignment. And then what should happen after the next build is when we check in some new stuff, it will automatically trigger. So let's go back to builds. I'm really not having much luck with this one, am I, today? So what did I do this time? Okay, shout out to anybody who can spot the error. If not, I'm just going to move on to the next phase.
Is it the project that's wrong? Is it Swiftly rather than swiftly.exe proj?
No, that's right. It's Xcode proj, scheme, Xcode scheme. Okay. It's okay. I think what we'll do is we'll continue on and we'll use one that I know to work that should just generate us some IPA files. So I've obviously got something wrong and I'm too close to it to see what I've done in a live demo. So let's just I'm sure it'll come to me later and I'll realize what I've done, but at the minute I can't see it. So not to worry, we'll press on. So what we probably want to do next is to actually try and get this building a production ready IPA file for an iOS project. So what I'm going to need is the certificate for distribution, its password, and the provisioning profile. Now, in the interface, what we would probably need to do is encrypt those values so we can then put them into the YAML file. So we've got a facility there. Hopefully you just noticed what I did there. I clicked on the button that says encrypt environment variables. You can encrypt simple strings. So if I wanted to put a password in there, I'd be able to click the encrypt button. That would encrypt, and it's locked to your own Codemagic account, so you can't use this somewhere else, and then it will convert it to a base64 encoded string, which you then can copy paste and put into your YAML file. You can also use this for files, so the provisioning profile, or if you're using something like Firebase and you want to put the Google plist services JSON in there, you can encrypt your files as well and then use them in the YAML. So I've got some already prepared. So I've got a provisioning profile, certificate, and password that I've got. I'll just pop those in there. Okay. And then we need to use those in the actual build. So these will become environment variables that I can then refer to when I'm producing my build. So we're going to add some information into the script section. Now I'm going to get rid of this because this is the problematic line, and I've got one that I hope will work. So I'll pop that in there in a second. So we'll start at the top and work our way down right to that command. So the first thing I want to do is use this command here, which will initialize the keychain on the macOS build server. I then want to set up the provisioning profiles. And here, what we're going to do is grab the provisioning profiles from the environment variable, which are just provided as an encrypted string. And then we're going to decode the base64 and then put it into a directory where we can access them on the disk. The next thing we're going to do is set up the handling of the certificate, which again is going to allow us to take that encrypted value from the environment variable and then use it via a CLI command that Codemagic provides. Now it's important to note that the CLI tools, which are open source, will actually carry out a lot of the commands that would take many lines to do if you're having to do this yourself. So especially when it comes to publishing to the app stores, for example, these tools make it very easy and make the YAML file much less complicated than it would be if we weren't using these these CLI tools. The next thing that we probably want to do when we're building is making sure that we're incrementing the build number. So I'm adding in a script here that will increment the Xcode build number. So you can see here in my App Store Connect, for example, I'm already up to demo version 65. I've got a bit of jump here from earlier. I think I must have gone crazy with adding in numbers into my demo files, but essentially what's happening here is I've been using an environment variable here called testflight index diff, and I've been just cheating by adding this in and saying add an extra 50 in between the builds just to make sure that the demo should build. We'll see if that's true in a moment or not. This variable here, build number, is available on the Codemagic build server. So you're always going to get that number, and that corresponds to the UI where we saw the index number of the build. So if we go back to the build, you can always access the build history here in the overview of builds, whether it's passed or failed, so we can still get access to the logs, again, which is troubleshooting help. And this is the build number that gets put into that build number variable. I'm going to use another couple of CLI references here. So that's the Codemagic CLI tools that we're providing for you. And that is the Xcode project use profiles to set up the provisioning profiles, and another one which lets us build the IPA. This syntax looks the same to me, so I'm just double checking that I've spelt these things right up here. So we'll try it in a moment and see. One thing that will probably fail if this does work is the fact that we want to be picking up an artifact, which is an IPA, so rather than a .app file. So I need to make that correct in the artifact section. So we're going to just pop that in there. Now these are very useful. When we get a successful build, we'll be able to see the artifacts on the server, and we keep a record of those. So whether it's the debug symbols for iOS or the ProGuard maps, obfuscation symbols, which if you ever need to troubleshoot any problems, you'll be able to go back and grab those and hopefully debug your issues quite easily. So let me just save that before I lose it. And finally, we're just going to add in a step for publishing. So if we can just pop this in here. Now, publishing obviously can be to things like the app stores. So it could be to App Store Connect, Google Play. Publishing also encompasses notifications. So that could be email notification or sending you a notification to a Slack channel to let you know that a build is complete. So you've got flexibility to add in different notification methods here. In this case, I'm using my Apple ID, but the password is for an app-specific password, and that needs to be set up on your Apple ID. In the security section, you can go in there and configure a password that you can then use. Another thing to note is that in App Store Connect, you need to set up the API access, which allows you to use the App Store Connect API for publishing the applications, which Codemagic uses. It's a very simple process. You literally need to get the account owner to go into the App Store Connect and then press the button to request access, and it's more or less instantaneous. It just gives you some terms and conditions to read, and then you can access the API. Okay, so I think all being well, we've got everything we need here in this file to give it a try. So I'm going to check it in. And then if it doesn't work, we'll be debugging for a while and seeing what happened.
I think if it doesn't work, we're going to record the debugging session afterwards and then share it.
Absolutely. Right, so we've got a build started. So it's preparing. And I've got my fingers and toes crossed that we've made it right this time. So it's given us a rundown of the different things it did there, which correspond with the scripts that I pasted into the file there. So setting up provisioning profiles, sign-in certificate, increment build number. It looks like a bit more promising because it's taking a few more seconds. So
yeah,
I think
the Xcode project itself is also part of the CLI tools, but it's a Python library that you can install on any machine.
Yeah, another thing to note is I'm using manual code signing, but you can actually use the CLI tools to handle that for you, to do automatic code signing. So you wouldn't have to add the manual certificates and provisioning profiles.
There was one confusion, I think, when you talked about the API key that you need to add. This is only necessary for automatic code signing, and we use the API key only to fetch, create, update, and revoke certificates and provisioning profiles. It has nothing to do with publishing to the App Store. The App Store publishing is handled through the backend logic rather than the CLI tools.
Yeah, I think I had it in my head because I was trying the automatic provisioning stuff recently. So
yeah.
Right, we've got a green build coming on, I think. Well, we've got the IPA created, so that's good. And we've got the artifacts, so that should be the debug symbols. So we're just in the publishing phase now, which is a good start.
But I think this is a good time to kind of finalize the demo as well. And if people would like to see this project, can they see it on GitHub as well? The file that you've just created, or this sample?
Actually, they can see it there. I think we've got a public repository, but it's also exactly the same example in the documentation. So we uploaded that about 2 days ago. So I'd recommend going visiting that.
So the exact same thing that you've just walked through, you can get from our documentation by looking at Codemagic with YAML and iOS apps.
Absolutely. So if you go into this Codemagic section here, building a React Native app, and then scroll to the bottom, and then you've got the exact same code here.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
Brilliant.
I guess if people have some specific questions, then we can answer them.
Yeah. So we've got a green build, which is great as well. So we've got a big green tick there. So
a couple of things that people have asked me, for example, is how are secrets encrypted? And if you encrypt those values, can others get them if you have this YAML file in your repo? And the answer is no, that encryption happens on a team level, and only the virtual machine that is running your build will be able to decrypt those values. So the secrets are safe. But if there are no questions, I think we can share this same recording online and with you, so you can watch it later and maybe slow down or pause in some places which needed some extra help. And we're also available on Slack if you have some questions that you want to ask that you don't come up with right now.